Thank you everyone for coming. And thanks to SAEM, RAMS, and CDEM for putting on this webinar. We have a great group of panelists that we'll introduce here shortly. We'll start with just a few quick slides, kind of summarizing some key points, and then open up to the group for Q&A. We'll keep an eye on the chat, and so if you have questions that come along throughout the PowerPoint, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll keep tabs on those and jump right in after the PowerPoint.
So I think we're just going to start by introducing our panelists here today, and then we'll pull up a couple of our slides. So I'm Allie Bonner. I'm one of the RAMS board members. I'm also a second year at New York Presbyterian. And I guess Genevieve, if you want to introduce yourself too.
Should have started with that. I'm Genevieve Pentecost. I'm a PGY4 at WashU in St. Louis. I'm also a member of the RAMS board.
And then Dr. Tillman.
Yeah, I'll go. Maybe I'll point out the rest of the panelists as we go. My name is Dave. I'm a ED doc here at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I was a clerkship director for about a decade, and now I serve as a dean for admissions, and I'm here representing CDEM from the board. How about you, Nick? Mark?
So I am Mark Levine, and I am one of the clerkship directors for Washington University in St. Louis, also on our residency committee that decides and makes the match list. Hold a bunch of other positions, but that's enough for right now.
That's enough for now. How about you next, Imogene?
Hi, everybody. I'm Imogene. I have a cold, so sorry if I'm nasally, but I'm here in New York. I'm at NYP with Allie. I'm one of the clerkship directors along with Jimmy, and I'm also one of the APDs.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Jimmy Trong. I'm also faculty here at Columbia University in New York City. I work with Imogene, Allie, and Dina. I'm also the clerkship director for our sub-I here as well.
Perfect. How about you, Dina?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dina Saba. I'm one of the PGY2s at Cornell Columbia, New York Presbyterian, and also couples matched, and would love to talk more about that later.
And then Juana is from SAEM/CDEM. Hi.
And we can get started. So these are the details of all of our panelists that just introduced themselves. So we wanted to introduce with some common questions that have come up. So I'll ask our panelists. We can start with Dr. Levine. Where do you start with making a rank list? What's the first thing to think about?
I think that probably one of the first places that's a tough question in and of itself, because where do you start really depends a lot on what you are looking for. Of these things, I would probably say that geography is one of the top things. Where do I want to be? Or more importantly, maybe where would I not want to be? I think that's really important. I think most of the programs, as you look through them, you're going to go ahead and say, they're all going to fit getting me into the career. Sure, if you're way more interested in doing academics, then that might be more important as opposed to maybe more of a community bent. And that sometimes will go along with the big versus small and 3 versus 4. But I would say that probably geography and vibes are going to be the best thing. Remember that you are going to learn emergency medicine regardless of where you go. And we're all going to teach it to you and enough that you can pass the boards and become a full-fledged doctor. The rest of it is, where do you feel?
Thank you for that. I would love to hear, Dina, was it at all different thinking about your priorities, like when you're going into the couples match?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of sacrifice that comes into couples matching. So ultimately, my partner and I decided it has to be, there's no downward moving. So we set our priorities and said we either move laterally or up, but we don't go anywhere, and neither of us don't want to. So we would never come up with a ranking where he's somewhere he doesn't really want to be, but that gets me at a good program, because that's not fair to either one of us and not fair to our career goals. So we kind of set our priorities up front, and that starts with making your very own rank list based on what's important to you, and then kind of matching those priorities. There will be certain sacrifices in certain areas, but you have to decide together what you're willing to sacrifice.
Awesome. Thank you for that. If anybody has any other thoughts they want to add on this slide, please feel free.
Can I comment on vibes? I definitely agree with Dr. Levine and his thoughts about geography and vibes. I remember for me, my family was all in New York, and New York was where I wanted to be and where I wanted to practice. I remember looking at all the different programs, and the program that I ended up going to was St. Barnabas in the Bronx, because I really vibed with their tribe. We were working a night shift, and then the senior resident was like, "Hey, Jimmy, you want to come get breakfast with us?" And I was like, you guys don't even know me and now you're inviting me to breakfast. So I just felt like the vibe was great. And I remember going to another program, which I won't name here. I don't, no one's from that program here. They had been seeing patients on the floor because they didn't have beds. And it was just catastrophic. I was like, I'm absolutely not going to go train in this program. So understanding the vibe is super important because you're going to be with these residents, your co-residents, for a couple of years. So it's so important to make sure that the vibe is there.
Yeah, I'm seeing, but I also wanted to add a quick point along with the vibes, basically, that leaving my #1 interview was the only one where I felt like I really knew the residents in the program through a computer screen. I really struggled with that during my interviews. Just like getting the feel of anybody through a computer screen, I think is really hard. So that was the one that I left and was like, these feel like my people, even through a computer. So that was one of my biggest priorities.
That's what I was going to ask, right? Because for a lot of us, EM was like a visceral decision. Oh my gosh, this is the right specialty in an obvious way. And the same thing for especially choice. We interviewed pre-COVID and pre-virtual. And yeah, how do you make the decision in a virtual world?
So I can chime in. I had multiple notes on every single program I interviewed at. It was very extensive, a little OCD, but you have to really set your priorities. What I found is I actually had a pretty good indication of vibes on the computer screen. I could also tell which programs I was very against just based on my interview day. So there were certain places that looked very good on paper, and I loved their curriculum and everything. And the second I got onto Zoom, I wanted to log off. So take that seriously. Residency is very difficult, and what's going to make it even more difficult is if you're stuck with people that you do not get along with. And sometimes, even when you're at a place you love, the only people who get you through the day are your coworkers, your co-residents, your faculty. So make sure you get along with them. That, in my eyes, is not something that's negligible. The other thing I found, there was a program I was kind of iffy about, and I went and met the residents in person, and then I definitely did not vibe with them. So it was another program that looked good on paper. I was kind of not positive, and then what really solidified it was meeting them in person. So I would say if you're very serious about a place, see if they have in-person second looks, because it really does make a difference, and I think it's good to see where you're going to end up.
Along those lines, I think also it's very difficult to get that vibe sometimes, but if, especially on the social aspects, if the residents are having a lot of fun amongst themselves, they know each other, they're enjoying each other, and that sometimes portends to a group that gets along really well. If they don't talk to each other and they don't talk to you, then yeah, I think that's a kind of a no-go program. But if they're having a lot of fun, you're like, I could be part of this. That might also be something to consider, even if you don't know them specifically.
So for this next point, oftentimes dialogue that comes up includes how many programs to rank. Should I rank everywhere that I interviewed? If I'm really not liking somewhere, should I still put it on my rank list? And in short, really you should be ranking all the programs that you interview at, with the exception that if you interviewed somewhere that you would rather go unmatched than work there, then you can not rank that program, but with the knowledge that's very risky. I'll tag in Dr. Worley to kind of elaborate more on this if you'd like.
No, I agree. And that's what I tell our students when we're talking them through their rank list is you should be ranking everywhere you interviewed, because that is sort of the decision is if you're considering not ranking a program, was it so egregious that you would rather not match at all? In emergency medicine, at least we're all like a friendly group in general. So you may not totally vibe with a program, but we're generally friendly. And so you will likely be okay somewhere. So it's rare, I find, that students don't rank somewhere that they had interviewed.
If I was your clerkship director, I'd be pulling my hair out if I knew you weren't
Yeah.
ranking. But why would you not do that? Just because the options on Soap Monday get really rough. And I'm not trying to scare anybody who's in the boat where they might be in Soap Monday, but having an unplanned Soap Monday sucks. They're like, it's career, just like this gut feeling. So I just strongly recommend against.
I'm already getting a heartburn thinking about students not ranking lists.
And I'm sure it's less common than the dialogue that's out there suggests, but I think it's important to kind of address in this format as well. And then we know as this slide shows that your probability of matching rises. It does plateau at a point, but still, if you're within that plateau of number of ranks, again, ask yourself, would I rather practice emergency medicine for the first time, or would I rather risk a SOAP and potentially going unmatched for a year?
Yeah, so I guess the next point we wanted to talk about is these are some general recommendations in terms of thinking about your priorities and like how many to rank, but it still can be a really confusing time. So how do you decide amongst all of that? Dr. Churong, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I think what you have here is great because your priorities do change even through the season as well too. Just figure out what are your priorities. Where we talked about geography, talk to your loved ones. You have to be close to a certain group of folks that you're close with. Or are you okay leaving the city or going to another area where you don't have any family? So it just depends on where you are in your life too. I remember when I did my rank list many moons ago, and at the time I was single, and I was like, you know what, I can probably try to consider going to other different areas in New York City. But I really wanted to stay close to home, which is why I ranked my rank list with locations and residencies that were closer to where my mom was and my partner was. It just depends. And you have a whole team of folks that are behind you, your clerkship directors, your advisors. Definitely seek out the advice of like residents or even like other students, your senior students who have gone through this within your medical school already. They can definitely help provide you with all this wealth of information as to what issues they had come through when they did their rank list. So definitely use all of the resources that are around you, even within the medical school as well too. You're not alone in this decision.
I love how you breezed past that first slide that had all the questions that I usually answer about like program prestige and 3 versus 4 year. I don't want to be crass. Applicants ask me this all the time. I'm like, who cares? You have to be happy for those years, and your likelihood of getting an awesome job has everything to do with how you succeed and thrive in residency, way more than like the residency name that you're coming from. And if you're not going to love it and you're not going to be happy, then you're not going to succeed and thrive. It's going to be so obvious. Sorry. So I'm bringing us back to that, but you breeze past it in all the right ways. Thank you.
And I think that as the community for emergency medicine is built nationally, especially in academics, you can find mentorship outside of where you match. If there's someone doing something outside of your institution, you're not just limited to the people where you train. It's important that your wellness and your happiness is there. And if you need to look outside to RAMS or SAM or elsewhere for some career mentorship, there's endless possibilities.
We had a couple other questions, but I didn't give them their own slides. But some common questions. This one is more specific for the residents, I think. But I guess if the clerkship directors want to think all the way back, how did you make your rank list and what did you prioritize or think about? Dina, do you maybe want to go first on that one?
Sure. This is very specific to the person. Geography was big for me, including my couples match, but program specific things I was looking at. I wanted a level 1 trauma center because I wanted trauma experience. I wanted urgent care experience. I wanted good ICU experience, meaning pediatric ICU, burn ICU, medical, neuro. So all of that played a part. What else was I specific about? I think the big things for me were the electives and also the didactic curriculum, the clinical curriculum, looking into the simulation curriculum. All of this really played a part in where I was thinking of going and the acuity as well.
Yeah, for me, I remember like the big things. It was really important to me to be in a city in general, but also in a city where I had people. So that definitely narrowed down geography for me. But I knew if I was far away from any friends or family that I could turn to for support, that was really going to impact me. And then I was really looking for a couple big things with programs. One was like, is wellness more than just a buzzword on their website? Because I do think there's a really good balance there. And that's an important thing to me is mental health and wellness. It's a big part of my life. And then like the teaching opportunities, because I knew I wanted to go into academics and teaching, like would I have those opportunities, not just with junior residents when I'm a senior, but also like med students. So those were like some of the big things I looked for. And then like one of the main questions I asked during my interviews was what kind of changes have been made based on resident feedback? Because I did really want a program that grows and changes based on what the residents think about their learning experience. So those were all things that I really considered.
Yeah, and my experience also sort of addresses Kelly's question in the chat regarding would you sacrifice qualities in a program for a location, or did you prioritize training in a program first? For me, I had some significant family factors that really had me anchored to St. Louis or as close as possible. I feel lucky that the qualities that I wanted in a program were present at the place that I matched. I wanted a strong EM critical care presence. I wanted high acuity, a trauma center with also offerings for robust community experiences, if that would be the route that I would have taken. But further down on my rank list, there were decisions that I had to make that put me closer to St. Louis that sacrificed some of those components of training, and places where if I didn't have a geographic anchor, I would have ranked higher in another lifetime. And so it's a hard question to answer broadly because it's a deeply personal one. And I think you really have to trust your gut of would I rather miss out on this singular facet of training to be close to whatever it is that anchors me, or are the vibes just not right enough to do that?
Yeah, so I'll move the next question to our clerkship directors. How do these new program signals factor into how students are ranked?
I don't know if we put as much weight on them as CDEM and SAM and everybody kind of implies that we put on them. Rarely, I think, are we taking a program signal and somebody without one and saying, oh, let's see, they signaled and they didn't, so we're going to go ahead and choose them for an interview. And I think that once the rank list is being made, it's did we like you? It really is a giant dating app. We are swiping left or swiping right. We think that you are also swiping left and swiping right. And I haven't been dating for a really long time, so I don't know what that means. But I do know that if we like you, we're going to rank you higher. And if we think you fit with our program, we're going to rank you higher, regardless of if you signaled us or didn't signal us. We want the best people for us, and you should want the best people for you.
Yeah, in theory, these signals should only be used in the interview generation process. That's the intention of them. I always assume best intentions, but I have to live my life as if they're not happening. But like you talk to your program directors, you talk to my team, it's the same thing. Like we are way early in the application signal to determine the rank list. That rank list is based on much more recent things, interview most importantly. So I wouldn't worry about it.
I totally agree. Don't worry about it once you get to the rank list. I remember it last year is it would like come be like, oh, they signaled us, and you're like, nah, that's nice. Move on. So don't freak out about it.
What about second looks? Does coming in person help me clarify my list? Does it change how I'm ranked at all? Thoughts on second looks?
I think second looks can be helpful, kind of to Dina's point earlier. They're helpful for you. I think this is a hard decision, and you want as much information as you can gather to inform your rank list. And so, if there's a program that you're on the fence about, yeah, go to the second looks, get more information. Or if there's a program you think you're really into, go to the second look and get more information so that you can be as informed as possible when you're ranking.
I also had places that didn't offer in-person second looks, but I went and drove around the area for places that were high enough on my list that I thought I might end up there. And I just drove around the campus, saw where I might be living, and that actually helped me tremendously because I drive in certain areas and say absolutely not. And then I remember walking around the Cornell campus and I was like, oh, I could do this. So I do absolutely think that's helpful if you're able to.
Yeah, it's all about your decision, and these programs aren't using that for their decisions. At least not anybody who's playing by the rules. Most second looks that I've heard of are being scheduled post. The timelines, are they the same this year? Or the applicant submission timeline and the program submission deadline are the same this year? I think that's true.
Yeah, I think there's an idea thrown around at some point, probably multiple points, that in terms of second looks, it would maybe be a good idea for programs to have an earlier deadline. There's no possible way for second looks to affect rank lists, but I don't think that's actually happened yet.
That's what I'm looking at right now.
It's all
Yeah,
the same.
they look the same.
But that being said, like I know a good number of programs do have their rank lists like submitted and locked, and they don't change them after their second looks, even if they could.
But my final thought would just go for you. Go for you to know if that's the place for you. Don't go to bring up your candidacy. This post-interview stuff, your candidacy, you can't move it in any real way on purpose, right? Which is good. You can't move it up in any real way. Say that leads into the next bullet point too.
I was just going to say that. So
Yeah.
reaching out to programs afterwards doesn't change where we are in the rank list.
We actually did a study on this. When did we make through the study? 2018. Like, how much are people moving based on thank yous? And it's no. And basically, the thrust of that study was, if someone says, don't send us a thank you, don't send them a thank you. If they say, yeah, go ahead, send them an email, say thank you. And it just doesn't matter. It's just the normal courtesy that you want to do to everybody. That's all.
I have to say, when I was going through, I'm from Virginia, and so my Southern grandmother was in my head, being like, obviously, I've sent thank yous. Who are you? I sent thank yous, but now on this side, I'm like, it won't influence where you are in the rank list.
I get a sense you reach out more than you should. You might make the program look at you in a different way if you keep on reaching out. And
So you're saying
Well,
daily thank
like
you
a
to
negative way.
much.
Yeah, negative way. Daily emails are like not okay for anybody.
Well, the rest of this is really set aside for an open Q&A. Genevieve, do we have any questions in the chat that might want to be verbalized?
I had sort of started to address Kelly's question, so if there's others that want to add to this, but would you sacrifice qualities in a program for a location or prioritize training first? That's all we have so far.
I do have one question here. So from the clerkship director's perspective, the question is, generally once you get an interview, it's the interview performance that matters more than everything else in the app. Is that true?
Once you get an interview, it's the interview performance that matters more or most. I wouldn't say so. I think the whole thing is meant to be holistic. Mark had a more important thing to say, and I'm sorry I cut you off, man.
No, I'm just going to say exactly the same thing.
And I'm sure you guys all know the definition of holistic, but the definition is that at no point would any one portion of your application be over torqued or brought to the forefront. Dave got a 201 on his step 2. That's all that we care about, right? Like, no, it's actually, that's part of the picture, and more things about me that makes me more of a good candidate, a rounded candidate, or less of a rounded candidate, all things taken with equal importance, holistically. I never answered how I made my rank list.
I want to answer how I made my rank list. I'm not proud of it. Maybe you guys want to know this.
I made my rank list based on all of my applications for residency were based on where my wife said, I want you to go here. I don't want to go here. And it's like, it was all basically like, stay close to her family. And then my rank list was based strictly on how much the website talked about inpatient months or weeks, which was pretty dumb. It's like, oh, 4 weeks of intern year decided by my entire residency. But you won't have that kind of math number data in any real way to make this decision, right? That's the hard part. Using the website to find some kind of metric to make your decision won't be useful, right? Like, they're not going to post their pass rate, but even if it did, it probably doesn't matter because it's not your pass rate. It's the last residency class's pass rate. They're not going to post their how many people applied to quick care fellowships, how many got in, right? There's how many got in, but that doesn't really matter because that's individual to that resident, and their circumstances aren't your circumstances. The numbers really couldn't matter. And if you're like me, you wanted them, you wanted something concrete, but I don't know if you're going to find them. That's why that first slide was really the only important slide. And
I made my rank list in a very unique way for everybody on here. It was in pencil. We didn't have the digital stuff. And I remember changing 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 like 6 times on the way down the elevator.
Yeah, we actually have a question. If you're tied between 2 and 5, how do you differentiate? And I think that's a good question because I kind of felt like that when I was making my rank list. I was very clear on number 1 and I was very clear on the bottom of the list, but everything in the middle was a little murkier. And that's when I went and analyzed the OCD notes that I'd been taking all season. And honestly, I switched them around several times before submitting.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that you're going to get a great education wherever you go. 1 is easy, 5 is easy, or all the way down. I think that for those numbers 2 through 5, you have to pick, I think, just one thing and go with it. Where do I want to be? Is location the best? Now, if you're choosing something like Chicago and you're like, hey, now I've got 5 programs in Chicago, now you've got other problems. A lot of times I've told students to go ahead and make a list of their pros and cons and rank each, pro or con 1 to 5. So if location is super important, that gets a 5. And if a burn unit is not important, then that gets a 1. And do that for all your important things, all your programs, and then put them in numerical order, and that will get you a little bit closer.
That's so
Yeah,
much
and
more logical than just repeatedly reading the notes I had.
you guys are all too late to get the advice that I usually give early this season, which is talk to your closest loved one immediately after every interview and make them write down how you felt about it. Because otherwise, like your notes and your recollections are going to be so flawed based on recall bias, recency bias, et cetera, et cetera. So good luck. But it probably won't matter. You probably know that almost all applicants match within the top three, and it's pretty rare to go down to even to the middle of a rank list, which hopefully is reassuring. But everyone feels like it'll be them, then there'll be that individual for whom they're going to have to go and where it really will matter. And that's okay. And that's normal.
In the end, it probably works out. My roommate in medical school got, I think, his fifth or sixth choice, and he was heartbroken at the time, but it turned out to be really great for him. And he's like, I was trained well, I had a great career, and he transitioned into other aspects of his career where he pretty much sits around, reads journals, and makes a lot of money. In the end, a lot of things work out, even if you can't see it right now. And it was a good program he matched into as well.
We've talked a lot about vibes, and there is a question. If you get good vibes, is that a good enough sign? Or are there red flags and things they should be looking out for?
I'd say you need to make sure you're still satisfied with the training. Like you can have a good time in any specialty, but that doesn't mean you're doing what you want ultimately. And those people are not going to make you a good physician. You have to make sure you're getting out of the program what you want to get out of it. The other thing I was going to say before is try to single out one or two residents at programs you're really interested in and call them. Find a time to chat because they will tell you what it's like on a day-to-day basis. And that's really hard to figure out just from interviews.
Yeah, I think it's the time to be self-reflective in a way about really what do you as an individual need to succeed? Like in residency, what would define success for you in residency? For me, I needed specific critical feedback. That's the only way that I'm going to grow. And I needed that a little bit. So I needed someplace that was actually willing to give me critical feedback, which was most places. And then it ended up with vibes, essentially.
If all the programs say hope to see you match or good vibes from all of your tops, how do you know how they really feel about you?
You don't. We are going to be just as polite to you as you are to us. We're not going to say, wow, hey, thanks for that interview. You really suck. We are not putting you on the match list. That's just not something we're going to do. Well, okay, that's not something we're going to do. I don't know about you guys. No, we'll do it behind your back. That's a whole different story. But
No, I mean everybody's on their best behavior during interviews and interview season, right? Like applicants are, we are, everybody's, which is normal.
And I think it's important to trust the process too. Once you do the rank list, there's only so much you can do. So I wouldn't perseverate over it so much.
I think that's probably the key for the program side too, is they might seriously say, we like you and you're ranked at a place that is whatever, 200 out of 250 that we rank. And that could be totally matchable for some, right? They do like you and they're happy that you're there on March 22nd.
we don't know how far we're going to go down on our
Exactly.
rank list. We are going to rank everybody in order that everybody has their own little grading system. And then there's some, sort of subjective, we really like this person, let's move them up once or something along those lines. But we're ranking people that we're going to be happy with. So we want a good program and we want people we're going to get along with. And we want you to be happy as well. If you get off vibes that you are really not interested, yeah, we might even say amongst ourselves, they're not bad, but they don't really want to come here or they weren't really interested. We aren't really in the process of not ranking you or literally lying to your face. I think we want you to come here. We want you to be happy and successful. And that's what you guys want as well. I wouldn't worry too much on the niceties. Did they really like me when they said we liked you? Probably yes.
All right. If you got an interview at some of your reach programs, should you be wary of how many reach programs you rank highly? And even though they gave you an interview, would you still think they might be out of your league?
Just go for it. Don't worry about imposter syndrome. Yes, Imogene,
Yeah.
we can all.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you got an interview at your reach, do the interview, do the best you can, because you don't know what we're looking for. We don't know what you're going to be like. So I say congratulations and give it your all. and don't let imposter syndrome get in the way.
Imogene and Mark's message is the better message. The math behind it is, of course, absolutely right. Mathematically, you should always make your rank list by your preference. Your top choice should be your top choice, regardless of what you think that program might be doing. You should have no care in your rank list to what that program might think of you. That should be absolutely unimportant. There's a good video on the NRMP website. It's okay. There's a better video on the number file website about the stable marriage algorithm. This is the Nobel Prize winning mathematical algorithm that empowers the match. It's basically, this is you driven. So your preference matters first. You liked it, top choice. There's no penalty for having top choice.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure this question was intended for the whole group, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is there any stigma when hiring attendings from NYC programs given the generally lower penetrating trauma volumes?
So we are in the Midwest in St. Louis, and we have a pretty decent number of faculty residents that come from New York City hospitals, and they're fine. No problem. They're all ready. Trauma, as you will find, is very algorithmic. It's actually not as difficult a thought process as it looks on ER or the pit or in real life. So I would say, no, that's absolutely, you wouldn't have to worry about that regardless of where you go.
Dina and I are just sitting here like, geez, we really hope not.
Ali, correct me if I'm wrong. That question was because we were thinking that people that trained in New York City did not get penetrating trauma training.
That's my understanding of this question.
I trained at St. Barnabas in the Bronx, and it was like stab wounds. We had train derailments. I feel like I got a good training there with that.
But that being said, I will also add, coming from a Manhattan-based program that sure is not necessarily the knife and gun club like 24/7, we still see more than enough trauma to become competent at it. And our residents are hired all over the country, regardless of being from New York City, has not seemed to negatively impact any of them. Our residents last year, every single one of them went to their like number one job offer, and all of them that went to fellowship got their number one choice. So I haven't seen any evidence that it negatively impacts us.
The way I think about it also is, yes, I hope we can go elsewhere and that we're valued. But I also think in EM in general, you need to be the kind of person who can deal with something you've never seen before. And I think that's kind of what we're built to do. So I think you're going to be an attending somewhere, whether it's somewhere you trained or not, and you need to see something for the first time and just be able to figure it out.
That's the best answer, right? Like you're going to have somebody come in with a cut LVAD drive line, and you're gonna be like, oh, I got to figure this out. You're going to see tropical diseases that you didn't think you'd have to see because your practice site is near an airport. All this stuff, and you have to figure it out. That's what EM is more about. Amen.
So this is maybe a little more of a general question. Are people more likely to match at a place they did in a way?
Yeah, rotation at that site is a more likely match at that site. There's a paper out there that shows like which percentage of each class is a former rotator at that site, and it's a low percentage, but it's still like teens percentage, but it still shows you that the rate of your odds improve.
And it makes perfectly good sense. It's back crazy, but back to the dating algorithm type of thing. You're more likely to go on a date with somebody that you have gone out on a date with before, right? As opposed to a blind date. We know you. We know your quirks, we know your pluses, we know your minuses, we know what you need to know, I should say strengths and weaknesses. And you also know about us. We're talking about specifically that, like, how do I know if I'm going to get along with these people? If your first day, you're a rotator there and we're like, hey, we're going out for drinks after work or whatever, or breakfast in the morning, you want to come with us? You're like, hey, that's kind of cool. We obviously like you. Hopefully you'll like us. So yeah, we'd rather take people that we know than people that we don't.
I think those were all the questions that were like directly submitted to me. I don't know if anybody sent any to Genevieve, but also you guys can feel very free to unmute yourselves and ask questions yourselves if you want to. Okay, I have another one. Did you ever feel good about your rank list?
No, it's a huge decision, but you do it and it all works out, right? You have to, like Jimmy said, trust the process. Like Mark said, now his friend is like living the good life. And you trust the process and give it your best preference and all your best, gather all the information you can, talk to all the people who matter to you, do a little introspection and put it out there. It's going to turn out great.
Also, the more you look at it, the worse it's gonna look. So just,
Also true.
and I think talking about it is very, I had some places when I got to that point where I was like, okay, should two be three? Should three be two? That I would talk out loud and my husband would be like, Dina, you called me right after that interview and you hated it and you know you hated it. So I would use that strategy as well.
One of the flight nurses that I work with, she's got a patch she puts on her uniform. It just has somebody, a yoga pose that says, let that shit go. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. You're releasing your preference list into an algorithm. You have your control is then gone, and the amount of worry that you can put into it is small in the end, which I know sounds very easy coming from my position here on the other side of this process. But honestly, if you make your own true preferences, just like Dr. Worley was saying, with some self-reflection, you're gonna be in a great spot. None of us here mentioned where we ended up on our rank list, but all of us here mentioned that our overall happiness and that the process in the end is functional and works well.
Yeah, I would say similar to walking out of the MCAT or step one, like you're going to immediately think, oh man, I made a mistake the second you hit submit. But give it 10 minutes, that goes away. And event over the following weeks, you'll just feel fine about it and you'll honestly forget a lot of the middle rankings and you'll just get your one at the end. And honestly, it's kind of nice knowing that you're just going to get the one. You don't have to make any more decisions after that. So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you everybody for coming. And if you have any questions, I think most of our contact information are available publicly. And I think all of us would welcome answering questions outside of this if you have anything come up in the future.
Absolutely. You reach out. That's all of us got into this business on purpose to advise and help and hang out.